Stan Gibilisco here to talk a little bit about ocean hazards. In 1980, I took a course that trained me as a beach lifeguard. That was when I lived in Melbourne, Florida, and it was in the winter time. It was in February, so we had to go in the water and train sometimes, and the water, I remember, was as cold as 60 degrees. But I learned that if you get stung by a man-o-war, you should use ammonia water to neutralize the poison after you pull the tentacles off. You'll know if you run into a man-o-war because it feels like you're running into hot wires, red hot wires. You get out of the water as soon as you can. You keep your senses about you. You take those little those little threads off of you. You'll recognize the man-o-war because it looks like a purple sac or a purple balloon. And then you pour ammonia water all over where the tentacles were to neutralize that venom before it can get into your system. And I know what can happen if it gets into your system because the first time I was stung by one, in or around 1984, I did not have any ammonia water with me, nor did the lifeguards have any cure or anything to put on the man-o-war stings either, which made me furious. This was on Key Biscayne, and the lifeguards were teenage boys. And all the time after that, every time I went to the beach in my backpack, I carried a 1-to-1 solution of ammonia and water in my, as I said, in my backpack, in a quart bottle. Just poured half the ammonia out and replaced it with water. Took it with me every time and never needed it for years until one day I did. And I know that antidote works because I was stung by 2 man-o-wars that time, and I was stung all over my upper body, and I figured that venom would kill me if it got into my system. So I kept my senses about me, took those tentacles off with my fingertips, which are pretty much immune to they're too thick for the little thingies to poke through, and I poured that ammonia water all over myself and then called the lifeguard, or went over to the lifeguard stand and said, "You better watch me for about 30 minutes because I might die." And he said, "Oh, you were stung by a man-o-war, were you? Just lie down right here and I'll give you some oxygen if you need it." And then turned out I didn't need it. Turned out it was very painful for about 3 hours, and that was the end of it. As opposed to the first time, when it was very painful for about 3 days, and it just never seemed to end. All sorts of symptoms. The initial symptom being what I was afraid I was going to have a heart attack. Man-o-wars, just like sharks, which have been in the news lately, can kill you just as dead as any shark can do. In fact, man-o-war stings are far more frequent than shark attacks, and you should worry about man-o-war much more than you would worry about sharks if you're going to worry about anything when you swim in the ocean. I just didn't worry. I figured that if it happened, it happened. And a couple of times it did happen. The first time I was prepared, or I was not prepared, and nearly died. The second time I was prepared and didn't even come close. But I remember the lifeguard, after I had been laying by his stand there for about 30 minutes, asking him to watch me from time to time. I remember thinking, I remember him telling me, I was the lifeguard involved in the only shark attack on this beach, and I thought, wow, there are sharks that come into Miami Beach just as much as they do in upstate Florida. But later I thought, you mean there was only one? In all the years you've been a lifeguard and in all the thousands and thousands of swimmers that have been in this water, there was only one shark attack? While I'll bet there were 1,000 or more man-o-war stings. Just as deadly, a lot less spectacular. Again, I was trained as a beach lifeguard and learned that ammonia water is the solution of choice, literally and figuratively, for those stings. Read up about it, and then, if you decide that you want to swim long distances in the ocean, be aware that there are hazards. And sharks and man-o-war aren't the only two. Now we have to worry about bacteria as well, flesh-eating bacteria. I'm rambling a bit, but I'm trying to get a lot of stuff into a very short time span. And the gist of it is, be prepared, and you'll be all right with a man-o-war. For a shark, well, there's no way to prepare for that. And there's no ammonia water that's going to deter one of those either. One little last story. One day when I had been swimming and came up to take my backpack back to my apartment on Miami Beach, I noticed that the ammonia water was gone. And I figured one of the beach bums saw that bottle and thought it was booze and drank some of it. I'll bet that sobered him up right quick. Stan Gibilisco signing off, not from South Beach, Miami, but from the black holes of Dakota Territory, United States of adventure. So long.